Yo, yo, yo. What's up, Internet? Thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel today. My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Today, we are going to talk about unresolved trauma, complex PTSD, TV shows that go on for too long, and movies that don't need to be made. It is the story of Peaky Blinders. Peaky Blinders was probably one of my favorite television shows for the first couple of years it was on. Um, I am not a foolish person, so I didn't go so far as trying to get a Peaky Blinders haircut ever. But Tommy Shelby was I wouldn't say he was my jam. He wasn't a good guy ever. But the show was incredibly entertaining. It was visually stunning. It covered a lot of things that I really care about, like trauma, family dynamics, intergenerational trauma, PTSD, um, just a lot of like really good depth in its storytelling. It was fast paced, had a baller soundtrack. The things that I loved about seasons, let's say 1 through 4 of Peaky Blinders it's a long list. Seasons 5 and 6, shorter list. But I just watched Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, the new movie out on Netflix. It had a short run in theater. And it's not very good. It's not a very good movie, and it's a really bummer end to the story of the fictional character of Tommy Shelby. I think the movie probably shouldn't have been made. This is not my psychological licensed therapist opinion. This is, as a fan of the show, I would say I don't think the movie need to be made. Spoilers ahead. Too much of the main cast either was unavailable for filming, unwilling to be filmed, or is not with us anymore in the land of real life filming. Which, that stuff happens. But then don't make the movie. Having Arthur not be in the film and be killed in the film but not on camera isn't a good choice. Having Alfie Solomons be killed and resurrected a bunch of times only to not have him in the film isn't a good choice. I don't know. The film was not unwatchable, but it wasn't a very good film. Certainly doesn't stand on its own. It has to exist as the cap to the show. Otherwise, a lot of stuff really doesn't make sense. But part of what worked for the show was it was television. This is not the glory years of television, right? This is where streaming starts to ruin everything. And so Peaky Blinders has a lot of depth in that it is 6 episodes a season for hour plus episodes. That not 4. There's 6 episodes that are an hour long. And so there's a lot of storytelling that can happen there. That would be 3 movies each season to tell a cohesive story versus a 2-hour film to tell a cohesive story, especially one that is supposed to have not just some emotional depth itself, but also wrap up a lot of this fictional character that we've been with for 22 years. If the first one set in 1918 to 1940, some fast math from somebody who doesn't do math anymore. We've been with him for a couple decades, and it just, the film really didn't do it justice. I rewatched the season 6 because I sort of didn't remember much about it, and I didn't really remember liking it, and I remembered why I didn't really remember liking it. One, because when it came out was real life rise of fascism was going on, so that's never a fun watch when your sort of detachment from reality mirrors reality too closely. But also Tommy has just become a little far-fetched. Polly Gray, who the actress Helen McRory in real life passed away, and so they had to write Polly out of the show. Polly being gone and Alfie Solomons still being alive somehow, but not being relevant. Tommy just doesn't have any foils left, right? And so his nephew being his protege, who then turns on him, is not very interesting. What's her name? Anna Joy Taylor whatever. She's in Furiosa and looks like a deer. I just have a hard time taking her seriously because in my head she looks like a deer. Now I have face blindness and I'm autistic, so like I don't necessarily do looks real well. This isn't me commenting on an actor's looks as reason to dismiss their work. This is just me saying some people look like cats, some people look like mice, some people look like deer, some people look like animals in my world. And that's not everyone's world. It's not a ubiquitous experience based on the few times I've shared this. But anyway, she's distracting in that for me personally. And so, yeah, season 6 not very good. We sort of have the rise of fascism. The foil is like Nazis, which again, I'm critical of Breaking Bad seasons 4 and 5 being like, and here's Nazis because we killed off the main protagonist. You can't kill off your Joker too early. If you're telling a Batman story and you have the Joker and then you kill the Joker off, that ruins your Batman story. It's just what happens. And Alfie is Tommy's Joker, right? Batman Joker. Tommy, Alfie. And so could have had a good movie here. I'd watch Cillian Murphy and Tom Hardy chew up scenery together and then throw Barry Keoghan in. Like, yeah, sign me up. I watched this movie expecting it to be bad, mostly on Cillian Murphy and Barry Keoghan. They didn't do a whole lot. And I think it could have, I don't know, so much of the main cast was missing. The guy who plays Arthur has real life issues, is either not acting anymore, is sort of in a position to not be playing this role. I'm not sure. I'm an avid watcher of a lot of British television, but I don't inherently keep up on British media figures unless it's like Richard Ayoade and Bob Mortimer. I watch the comedy panel shows probably more than anything else, and little Alex Horn. But so, like, again, some characters were still around. I don't know why Tom Hardy might not have wanted to be in it, or if they just wrote it not for him, or he was like, yo, this has deteriorated too much. I don't know that Tom Hardy is currently holding out for such high stakes roles as Venom 4.5 or whatever we're on. I have not watched the Venom movies, to be clear. I like Tom Hardy. I don't know. Yeah. So what we're sort of left with is the Immortal Man. And it's a bit of a story about fatherhood. It's a bit of a story about what our legacies are. But even that can't work to carry the movie because Tommy has another son that is not mentioned the entire film. Right? Where's Charles? Charles went off with Lizzie. Where's Lizzie? We don't know. I don't know the real life reasons why Lizzie wasn't included in this story. Set 6 years after the end of season 6. Season 6 was a bummer, but Tommy puts himself in isolation. And it ends with a great Bob Dylan cover, All the Tired Horses, and like, you don't get character resolution. Again, season 6 wasn't good, but if I were to defend the character arc that they were trying to tell in season 6, it would be, well, Tommy's a bad guy, and so at the end of his life, he's lonely and has nothing to show for all the awful things he did, is at least like a story to tell, right? It's Icarus. He flew too close to the sun. Fine. That's not really the story they told because they've always wanted Tommy to still be cool. And that's what plagues the movie as well. Tommy is both haunted and still actively grieving and also supposed to be the coolest, most untouchable figure around. I think one of the reasons anime can do this archetype so much better of like sort of the untouchable cool guy is anime is not bound by the constraints of real life. And so you can have, Saitama from One Punch Man. You can have Goku from Dragon Ball Z. You can have Mash from Mashley. I don't know that I've ever said that out loud. Whatever, you can have all those main characters who just keep leveling up, and are innately cool because they're cool. And all like the hard part of that plot is coming up with what might eventually threaten them, right? And you end with like One Punch Man has to fight God, and like it's fine. But That's not what Peaky Blinders is doing. Again, Peaky Blinders wants Tommy to be wounded. The whole first hour of this 2-hour film is no action and brooding Tommy. And again, like, if this is just a money grab, which I very much think it was, fine. Put Cillian Murphy on screen, light his cheekbones so they really stand out, make sure he doesn't blink for an entire take. People are going to watch it, right? I did, because I really didn't like the movie, I watched a touch of the podcast that is also on Netflix, and Cillian Murphy, his name's Cillian. He's incredibly Irish, right? Like, but that's not how Tommy Shelby talks. And so when you hear Cillian really talking, and again, he's Scarecrow in Batman Begins. He's in Inception. He's in what's that one where they fly into the sun? You know, he's been in a bunch of really good things, and not his own accent. I do mean to watch 28 Days Later. He's in that, right? Maybe he uses his normal speaking voice in that. I don't think so. Again, it's almost distracting. I would love to see him in like a season of Fargo. Is Fargo still making new seasons? I'm not current on these things. Anyway, just because I'm imagining his accent, but like in the Midwest. No changes. Don't do a Midwest accent. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. I like accents. I think they're fascinating. Part of the reason I don't think I could flee America and live in a different country to do my work is all the countries that are English speaking have very specific accents, and I would just be chuckling all the time, talking about really heavy stuff in therapy. Anyways, where was I? Yeah, I don't know. Tommy's supposed to be wounded, and so he oddly, this film is about fatherhood. It's really focused on, like, he's grieving Ruby. And again, I don't know if they didn't watch the whole show. I didn't rewatch everything before this, and I was like, wait, what about this? Right? And it's almost like they took what story they maybe wrote and wanted to tell, and then as real life people dropped out or weren't available, they just cut pieces of the story out, and we're like, wow, we're gonna go with it anyway. So you're sort of left with like Johnny Dogs, and the dudes from the docks, Curly and Charlie. Is it Charlie? That's what he names Charles after. And that's it. And like Johnny Dogs is a good character because, again, Johnny Dogs is never a Peaky Blinder. Johnny Dogs is not beholden to Tommy. He is friends with Tommy. He helps Tommy because he's Tommy's friend. Again, like if you're looking at sort of, he's never the foil to Tommy, but he's like part of his moral conscience, right? Like he is, he's an important figure in Tommy's life and development. They've been friends since Tommy was young and came back from the war, and they continue to be friends as peers. And like, that's really important to humanize Tommy. But there's no really other like Peaky Blinders left. Duke has remade the Peaky Blinders in what he thinks the Peaky Blinders were supposed to be, but he's clearly not cut out for it. Barry Keoghan is really good in this film. It's just that Duke's not a very likable character. He's not fully set up to be Tommy's equal. And again, Barry Keoghan plays it well, where he's in over his head. He's trying to be his dad and can't. And again, I think that's the story that they were like, all right, we'll tell this, right? Because Tim Roth is in it as a Nazi, and he says some really, like, I would say cringy things that in a 6-episode, hour-long episode season, I think you could get away with some of this stuff. You could flesh out some of the things, but because it's so compressed, they really had to tell, not show. And that's not how good storytelling works, right? I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I come from this world where WWE has gotten so bad forever, but really bad at storytelling, which at least they used to do 10% of the time. Again, because the Attitude Era sucked overall, but some things were really great. When wrestling's great, it's great. And when wrestling is at its best, they're doing show, not tell, right? You're seeing characters develop. You're seeing relationships develop. You're seeing the betrayal. You're seeing the loss, the hurt, the rise, right? It's why Hangman Adam Page's story in AEW is so compelling, and something like Cody Rhodes in WWE is not. Because one is show, not tell. You're getting to watch it happen. The other one is just telling you what's happening. And the movie Immortal Man is telling you what happened, right? We've got this kid who didn't really grow up with his dad, comes into his dad's world right before his dad leaves. And then to try and get his dad's attention, he tries to replicate what his dad did. Fine. Not an unreasonable story to tell. Classic. Sure. We can do the dad story, right? Father, son. The student is now the master. Yep. So like Tim Roth's character is like, if you were my kid, I'd be proud of you, because they have to hit us over the head with it to be like, this is the story we're telling. But again, it really falls flat when Tommy comes back and like Tommy's got another kid. Tommy's grieving Ruby, and then Tommy's got Duke. And where's Charles? With Lizzie. Where's Lizzie? We don't know. And so we're left with this character who we've grown and seeing the development. Again, Peaky Blinders was really good for a long time, and we got to see Tommy develop. We got to see the complexity of Tommy and Lizzie's relationship. We got to see that even though he treated her horribly, she stood next to him. And then we got to see her character development finally stand up for herself and leave. And like, yes. And none of that's there in the movie. And so you introduce all this heavy stuff. Tommy has PTSD from being at the war. Tommy has PTSD from all the violence he's done. Tommy has PTSD from his brothers dying violently because of him, right? Tommy has PTSD from seeing his wife get shot. Tommy has, I don't know that I would say PTSD from, like, Ruby is almost the worst option they could tell from what Tommy's trauma is, because she dies when he's not around. He's trying to save her from a curse, which, like, again, that's always sort of a weird thing in this film, is like it's grounded in reality, but Tommy's a gypsy and Tommy has like gypsy tendencies. And it worked for Polly, and like it worked when that foil was there, when Polly was there to say, you're not just a Peaky Blinder, right? But like by seasons 5, 6, he's a PM, he's in Parliament, he's doing all the things. Like, he's not a gypsy anymore. He's got a mansion and drivers, and so that character progression doesn't make a ton of sense then, for like, oh, he's gonna sleep with the gypsy queen, and also she sees visions of his dead daughter. Like, I think Grace would have been the better option. I think John obviously was written out of the show because he didn't want to be in the show anymore, because he thought he was going to go on and be a bigger actor than being in Peaky Blinders. Whatever. So that I just feel like there's so many other characters they could have picked. Picking his daughter, who died in a way that wasn't his fault. So in theory, I think that could have been a really interesting character beat to tell, because Ruby's the one character that he tried to save who didn't die because of him. Now, I think he thinks in story, in universe, I do think he would blame himself for her death because of the cursed gem, right? But directly, he's not the cause of that. Again, I think in sort of the part of his brain in character that is the gypsy brain is going to take blame for it. But I think it could have been an interesting story beat in the sense that, yeah, everyone else died of like direct violence because of Tommy's actions, except Ruby dies of consumption, probably tuberculosis, some sort of lung thing. They just had sort of, consumption was this catch-all for those types of diseases back then. But like, we have like the PTSD episode. The first season is about Tommy's PTSD. We see it in the tunnel he has to go into in the movie. Like, it's still there. We have a character he had to kill because they were shell shocked, right? The show did such a good job of taking real life things and putting it in this fictional world that set at a real time and place about the horrors of war, about the horrors of fascism. Like, there were stories to tell, and it's just, we had to be like, but Tommy needs to be cool at all cost. And that really sacrificed any of the character development. I think Alfie dying was meaningful, but then they brought Alfie back. And that sort of like cheapened the stakes, but Alfie was lessened, right? Alfie couldn't be Tommy's foil anymore. And even though they kept trying to show Tommy as weakened, as being wounded, as being flawed, he always overcomes it. And again, I brought up pro wrestling earlier. Like, it's sort of what was always wrong with John Cena as a character, because it didn't matter. He never lost, right? It was just LOL, Cena wins. You hit him with a chair, you drop 50 chairs on him, you whatever, right? Like, he just didn't lose. There were never any stakes because you could introduce these fake nonsensical stakes and he would still overcome them. Overcoming without ever needing to work at it isn't interesting, which is some of the issue with those anime. Which is why they have to work and work and work to create bigger and bigger bads. I think it's again, Tommy's story should have always ended well or ended poorly, right? If we're comparing Tommy, and I haven't finished Sopranos yet, I've stalled out. I don't know why. It's still a good show. But knowing, spoilers, how that ends too, loosely, I've not spoiled the whole thing for myself. But like, right, Tony dies. Like, he's not a good guy. He doesn't get a hero's end. He needs to die. That's what needs to happen to Tommy. But again, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too in the movie, in that Tommy comes back, saves the world, gets wounded while doing that, and then his kid shoots him to take his place. But like, Duke didn't take his place. Duke, naming himself Duke, giving himself that nickname as a kid, and then wanting to be a king, but realizing he doesn't have what it takes, is the story they told. And then they try and end on the character beat of like, Tommy gives him the crown at the end. The torch is passed because Duke puts Tommy out of his misery. And then we get like the burning of the wagon at the end. But again, it's so weird who's there at Tommy's funeral and like the wake. It's none of the characters we need to see. They couldn't even get the rights to like show up, which is weird, right? It's on Netflix. But they couldn't even get all the rights to bring back all the characters and like ghost them into the show or do flashbacks or whatever. Like, a ton of people should have been seen there to really give it the emotional gravity. But instead, we're left with the few Peaky Blinders who they could get in this film, and like Johnny Dogs and Duke. Ada, the one Shelby who's still in the film, dies earlier. Which, like, Ada's character arc is interesting. She's the one who least was interested in being a Shelby and kept trying to leave. And it was arguably maybe the one who's like good. The juxtaposition of Ada being somebody who had a lot, didn't have the PTSD from the war, but definitely had a lot of trauma still, and all the same family dynamics that Tommy did. Ada was probably the one who was closest to a good character. And Ada, again, represented following, doing it right as according to the system. Whereas Tommy's whole thing was like doing it wrong according to the system, but coming out ahead, which is a fine story to tell. But if you're going to tell a story about a famous street gang, like there's probably some comeuppance there. If your morality tale is not going to end with overthrowing the unethical occupying force, right? If it's not supposed to be a revolutionary figure who gets to overthrow the evil overlords, then your bad guy, your villain, your thief in a cops and robbers dynamic needs to get the comeuppance. That's the story that you tell. And they couldn't do that because Tommy needed to be both cop and robber. Doesn't make any sense by the end of it. And I'm not defending cops. Like, I'm just saying, if that's the story you're telling, the story could never be Tommy overthrows the Queen of England and frees the working people. The problem with making it a historical fiction is like, you're sort of beholden to what happened in history. You can add to it and you can tell unique stories within that timeline. But like, right, Tommy couldn't go kill Hitler in this film. And we know that England is still a colonizer. They're still an empire. And so Tommy can't be like this working class regular dude, which is how the early seasons are, is the system stacked against him. And so he can overcome the system, right? Because the system is bigger and more powerful than him. So that is actually overcoming. But when he becomes the system, I don't know. It all breaks down. It's unfortunate, right? I don't have a solution for what happens if one of your main characters die in real life. But again, like, Tony Soprano's mom dies in real life, and like the actress who played Tony Soprano's wife, mom, dies. And like, again, I think that's fine. They had the funeral. It was a good representation of family dynamics. I talked about it. I think that's season 3 of Sopranos. So my review of that is out. But like, you can work with that as long as there's on-screen resolution. Sort of what happened with Polly is they just did the funeral and then moved on. So I don't know. I don't have a solution. It's sort of up there now with like Dexter, as shows that went on for too long and like really should have stopped when they peaked. Tommy shooting Elfie on the beach could have been the end of it. I'm not saying story-wise what they had filmed at that point of the season, but like the next season then could have been Tommy gets his just desserts and that's it. And that could have been a cohesive end to the show instead of being like, let's introduce a new foil. And at that point, how many times had Elfie betrayed Tommy? Again, like put Tom Hardy and Cillian Murphy on a screen and have Cillian shout, "They've taken my boy." Like, poof, chills, right? Chills. But when you don't have that anymore, and when you've diminished one character but not had someone take their place, you don't have that foil. It doesn't work. And all the trauma and all the psychological stuff that they introduced didn't get resolved then because of some plot holes and some real life issues with filming. So then just don't film it, which leads me to streaming and the cash grab nature of modern movie making is such a bummer. Right? And this is like a BBC show, so it wasn't a Netflix streamer, but like talking about Sopranos on HBO back in the day was, longer seasons. Talk about Deadwood, or you talk about 6 Feet Under, which is a show 5 seasons long. It's one of the best endings ever, because they told a cohesive story, right? And they could kill people off, and they could work it into the story, and they could resolve it, and like it worked, right? Dexter should have ended at season 4, or at least gone into season 5 to resolve season 4, but then ended instead of doing 8 seasons and going on for too long. But now we don't have those things. Now we get 6 episodes and shows don't get renewed, even if they do well. So we really don't get any resolution. But also we're in so much of the tell don't show because Netflix executives think that we're on our phones instead of actually watching the shows. I'm old. I'm in bed on my phone watching these things. I know you should watch certain films in theater. I don't know that Peaky Blinders was one of them. And like I support the cinema. I'm excited to go to the Milwaukee Film Fest. Starts, I don't know, 16th, 18th, something like that next week by the time this video comes out. I'm super stoked. I'm going to go see a ton of films in theater, local films, independent films, documentaries, weird horror stuff. Last year, the film fest, I love Vulcan Isadora, right? And there's a film nobody has ever seen that I've spoken to in real life. And also this German film called Peacock was really good. Like, I'm here for the weird and the stuff. Like, there's good cinema and there's good films being made, and theater is awesome. And it's a great medium to tell stories and engage in these psychological things. When you've laid all that groundwork in a show, and then you try and rush an ending that is missing all the pieces that worked, and you can't hit that emotional depth because of the medium that you're using to tell the story you're trying to tell. I don't know, just don't do that. It's just such a bummer. I will remember fondly seasons 1 through 4 and then forget what happened 5, 6 movie. Womps. There's also just cinema and movies that tell cohesive stories in and of themselves are great. And we don't need sequels and remakes and all of it, right? Because now we're getting like a Spaceball sequel 30 years later. Now I just sound like an old man shouting at clouds, but I do love the cinema and I do like movies, and I liked Peaky Blinders for most of its run. But we're left unresolved psychologically, story-wise. It's just a disappointment. And not even in like, haha, everyone died, isn't that nihilistic? Because I generally like that ending in films. Just in like, man, they really didn't stick the landing for the story they were trying to tell. So that's a bummer. Anyways, drop down in the comments and let me know your favorite Alfie Solomon's moment. If there's something you would like to hear me talk about, drop down in the comments and let me know that. We'll be back. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to talk about next. I'm in between things. I should probably finish Sopranos at some point. So maybe that. But I'm watching Doro Eudoro, and that's probably not worth a analysis. So sometimes I just watch things for fun. If you want me to watch something and talk about it, drop down in the comments, let me know. Actually, I am doing a follow-up from a comment like a year and a half ago. Somebody told me to watch Moral Oral, and I'm just getting to it. And that I have thoughts. So maybe that'll be next. All right. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.